Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Learn with Google webinar on multi-channel funnels. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll be your moderator, and we'll have a few other moderators as well. So if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A chat box. Today's webinar is the fourth webinar in our series on attribution. We're so glad that you've been able to join here. If you haven't seen the prior webinars, you can also look those up on the Google Analytics blog. We'll be sending links following the webinar so that you can view those and also sign up for our next webinar in the series. Please note that there are several widgets in your console. As I mentioned, you can submit questions using the Q&A box. You also have a resources widget that includes helpful links to our website, blog, and several Help Center articles. There is a couple of social sharing buttons as well. If you would like to do so, we encourage you to use the hashtag attribution. And finally, there's also a survey link, so please don't forget to fill out that survey before you leave. And the webinar will be recorded. We'll be sending out a link to the webinar recording in the email that you'll receive sometime in the next week. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Neil Hoyne, who is Google's Global Program Manager for Attribution. Neil, please take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you're calling from. Thank you so much for joining us in this fourth webinar series as part of our ongoing discussion and conversation around attribution. Today we're going to be discussing specifically multi-channel funnels. And this is a conversation that's really been a long time coming. So when we started off with this webinar series, we really just started about discussing the opportunity of attribution, why it's interesting to pursue it, what other companies are doing, where there's opportunity in the market, and some of the benefits just that come from the subject area. And as we've gone deeper, we then went through in actually setting up Google Analytics and understanding how those connections are built between those measurement tools and AdWords. And then we went even further to go into search funnels within AdWords to say where are there some specific opportunities in what we like to call intra-channel attribution. That was the last webinar with my colleague Simon. All those webinars are also available to those that are new to the series. You can find those online through the Google Analytics blog. Now, as we go through this, it's just worth noting that this is a very dense subject, but we'll try to make it as practical and as applicable to your business as we possibly can. As we go through this, we'll do some live demos mixed with slides, and we also ask you to send any questions you have. We'll be reviewing those live. My two colleagues here will be actually answering some of those questions, and I'll also be trying to address some of them directly through the webinar. First of all, just a little background as to who I am. So here's my contact information. I usually put up my email address, but it became a little bit unmanageable just with the volume of inquiries we have. But as I said, we do try to make these things more about a conversation than just a straight presentation. So Google+, and I also put up my Twitter handle up there too. And that way, in case anybody have any questions after this webinar or just about using these tools, send them along. I may not be able to respond to everyone individually, but do rest assured that we are looking at that feedback, and we will use it to integrate into either better Help Center documents or feed it directly back to our wonderful product and engineering teams to build stronger products. So talking about this title, Global Program Manager of Attribution, so what exactly do I do at Google? And really my focus is looking at unique visitors, and that's really what I spend probably 40, 50 hours a week doing, and really trying to understand, out of all these individual unique visitors, who are the ones that actually convert, and why did they? And then at the same time trying to understand, well, why are there some people that didn't convert? Right? And when we look at these, we always use metrics and say unique visitors, page views, when really we try to go one level deeper and understanding that everyone is not simply a metric or an additional hit on a page, but rather someone's colleague, someone's husband, someone's aunt, someone's parent. And understanding really what are those stories behind them. Because we know that when people click on your ads and they go to your website and they're clicking through social networking sites, we know that their decisions on whether to buy or not buy are not exactly predetermined. In fact, we know that they actually go through elaborate paths. Right? On their way to a conversion, it's not usually just one click, as it is multiple. And what we actually have is through this tool, multi-channel funnels, we can actually see these individual paths. It's an absolutely brilliant tool where we can see these paths develop, and we can see how people would go from a display ad to a search ad, go across channels, and then some would purchase. And then we can see at the same time how other people need additional interactions, sometimes across channel, where they're going to organic search and affiliates, and then they convert. And we're also curious why some people go down these paths, and after going through multiple steps, they actually don't convert at all, or they abandon. We lose track of them. And we wonder, well, why is that? Where do we have the opportunity as they were going through these individual paths to actually influence their behavior, and where were their deficiencies? Where were there areas of information that they needed? What were they looking for that they didn't find? And where can we help to change that or at least become involved? And at the same time, we look at all these individual interactions and say, who's really responsible for it? We see display leading to search and then to a purchase in one case, and we say, okay, well, is it display that receives credit because they were the first click and they introduced the customer into the purchase funnel? Or is it the search ad because that was what was responsible directly before the purchase, what we call last click? And the subject of attribution, the concept behind these webinars is understanding who exactly you give credit to and where you assign value. And what we've proven, at least through some of the previous webinars, is that we know attribution is a tremendous opportunity. And now it's a challenging journey for advertisers. There's no single quick fix, but it also represents one of the greatest opportunities they have today to grow their business, to find new opportunities to further optimize their advertising and their marketing spend. Now, as we go through this webinar, it's worth just at least bringing, as we recap some of the ideas we talked about, as to why exactly this opportunity came about. And it really happens when you look at the two of the greatest opportunities that came around with digital advertising. The first was that we could target people at the right time. So instead of putting up, say, a billboard or sending out a radio ad that would reach a wide market, we could reach people specifically when they were interested in taking that vacation or buying that new product. So we had this ability to target. At the same time, we had this ability to measure. And when we looked at measurement really went from just being broad areas like reach and circulation, who may actually see your ad, to something more granular, where we were able to go with impressions, who actually did see your ad on a page. And then we went to clicks, where clicks were important because you could actually see who was interested in your ad, in your message. And then we went to conversions. And about 6-8 years ago, when that became the predominant means of measurement, we thought that this was a holy grail. Now we could directly attribute credit to those actions that were leading to a conversion, leading to more revenue. But as we previously discussed, we actually know that there's multiple steps that go through. It's not always the last click that drives value. And oftentimes those clicks and those interactions that are further away from the purchase, because they don't get credit from a standardized last click model, they usually look like they underperform. And the common behavior is, well, if they're underperforming relative to those branded keywords, for instance, we cut them out from our marketing campaigns. But at the same time, we lose that feeder channel that's leading in new customers and really generating growth for the business. Now, when we're presenting these webinars, we really wanted to give a sense as to how many customers and advertisers we actually got ideas from. And over the past year, probably about 14, 15 months now, we've actually had the opportunity to work with about 250 advertisers on these attribution problems. And that 250 advertisers, this isn't a simple survey that went out. In fact, these are advertisers that we've had discussions with, we've worked with, experimented with, analyzed their data, and learned from them, as well as they learned from us, as to how to use these tools and to where they found insights. At the same time, we have over 10 million websites that are currently using Google Analytics. And multi-channel funnels, the subject of today's discussion, is actually included in all these properties for free. And we've actually received a tremendous wealth of feedback from these customers about how they're using this data and about what they want to see, what metrics they want surfaced, and what would really be impactful for their business. And we've been able to take this feedback and been able to use it, and the product and engineering team is incredibly receptive to these ideas. In fact, they love new feedback, and they wait for us to give it to them because they really want to understand what they can do to build better. And as you see these incremental iterations coming out of the tool that keeps getting better, it's usually driven by customer feedback and what you want to see. And that also guides our discussion today. So when we talk to these advertisers, we try to understand, with all these ideas around attribution, what are they actually taking away as actionable guidance? What are they actually trying to use? And what we found out was that the most successful advertisers that we work with, a very small fraction of them, are actually using this data to find every possible opportunity. So some just jump directly into attribution modeling, which has a place, and we'll certainly get to covering it within this webinar series. But for the majority of those that are successful now, they're just looking through these tools and saying, we have these new data points, these new inputs about customer journeys. What can we do with them to further optimize our performance and how we're investing into digital marketing? So we really look at them as grabbing every opportunity that they have, every metric that's available, and saying, what can we really do with it and how can we leverage our business? Now, we'll give a few examples, and it's worth mentioning with all these opportunities that these are areas that advertisers explore, test, and experiment with before making large sizable investments, because you always want to see how the market reacts, given that this is an auction, and how your customers react as you start reaching different parts of the funnel. So just keep that in mind as we go through, but these are opportunities that they have found and guidance that they have taken that we've seen success with. The first area, and these are very broad areas that they look at, is how many ad clicks they actually measure. So what we have here on the left-hand side is we actually have a variety of channels. And on the right-hand side is a scale for those channels that will assist versus those that are converting. So those that convert are ones that are likely to be towards the last click when you're looking at this purchase funnel. And for those with the high conversion ratios, they tend to be valued more appropriately. Where things like display, email, and social, we tend to see further away from the last click, things that introduce and assist in the conversion process. And because of that, a majority of their contribution is lost using only a last click measurement. So we talk to companies and we say, well, how do you use this information now that you can understand more as to where these channels are performing and where they're contributing? And the advice they've taken is simply to set higher CPAs, to know that if they're measuring everything on a last click basis and there's contributions further away from the last click that they're not capturing, they make simple adjustments to start bringing in some of that value. At the same time, when you look at these individual channels, you try to see how exactly is your performance measuring up to where these channels should be. So remarketing is all the way at the bottom. Remarketing lists are usually built from people that have taken a specific action on your website, such as adding something to a shopping cart, but then they don't complete the conversion. And you could use a remarketing program to go through and target these people again as they go other places where we have network inventory. And you see remarketing on the bottom, which makes sense intuitively because you would think remarketing, you're targeting people late in the conversion path. These should be the people most likely to purchase and therefore be closest to the conversion. Well, some of these smart advertisers are actually using this information to understand how their remarketing performance and other channels are performing against expectations. So if you were to see remarketing higher on the list of assists, it may mean that your creative or your targeting can be improved to actually use remarketing in the way that it's intended. So if you were to put a branding ad that you were serving simply to those people that already added something to the shopping cart, it may not be the best way to actually draw them through and get them to complete the purchase, instead just bringing awareness. So keep that in mind that you can actually use these very powerful metrics just to understand and benchmark your performance around how those channels, keywords, and campaigns were built. The next thing to discuss is also just measuring individual visitors. So what we found out was that most people tend to look strictly at the visitors on their website that actually convert. Right? You have tags, you're capturing 100% of the visitors that are coming through your website, but at the end of the day, most customers are just looking at those 2% of people that actually purchase. And they're missing a lot of opportunities to improve their bidding by driving economic value to their business through these ideas of micro-conversions. So for instance, somebody going to a store locator or signing up for an email, printing a coupon, requesting a catalog. These are all activities that drive value to your business and make your marketing more efficient. For instance, sending out an email to someone has almost no cost. And now you can email to people, but those paid search keywords that brought people in look like they actually lost money because they didn't actually purchase on that first visit. And what we can do is we actually have metrics now that surface, now that we have the customer path, to look at how people are going through these and how many people are actually ending up on a particular goal. In one case, we actually saw 42,000 paid search clicks for an advertiser that ended up with a customer looking for a store, but they were given no credit, so that investment looked like it was lost. And if we were to put a 45-cent CPC on that and balance it out, it was almost $19,000 a month that they saw in paid search of people that were likely going into a store to make a purchase as opposed to buying online. Maybe they needed something right away. But when you looked at the marketing analysis, all it contributed was it looked like higher CPAs because those keywords weren't performing. So the really smart advertisers are putting this information in, understanding how much these goals are worth, and even coming with approximations. At the very least, this goal should be worth a number that wouldn't make this a negative investment, but at least null out. Some advertisers actually go a step further and say, well, if we anticipate that the average order value is $150 and that 1% of those people will convert, we're going to give this goal $1.50, which means that people now coming through this particular path, we will see that as a positive ROI instead of almost a $20,000 loss, almost a $40,000 gain. So those are two opportunities. A few more. Also, now that we have conversion path data, there's a lot of power within what we call the first impression, which is looking at that very first introductory step that gets people interested and connected with your brand or your website for the first time in their journey. And as we look through this information, now we can actually segment out by the channels and the keywords that they're coming in and looking at how that influences average order value. Now, this here is an illustrative example. We'll go through in the demo how exactly to get to these numbers. But we have seen a number of cases where advertisers have actually found opportunity by investing in certain first-click approaches as to how they can improve average order value later down the path. And for instance, in this example, if it happened to be display may have a higher average order value. But as we mentioned before, it also assists more than it converts, which means likely that higher average order value was simply wrapped up into a paid search keyword, a direct visit or organic search keyword by this advertiser's current investment. The last opportunity just to consider as we go through this is also looking at how much money is wasted, of course, due to a poor website. And we've had countless discussions with advertisers where we talk to them about optimizing websites. And we've been hearing this for about 15 years, that you're always supposed to be optimizing your website. And it's difficult because how much do you optimize your website or your creative? Well, here we can actually use these clicks in between the path to understand, okay, well, how much money is actually lost? And what we can look at is we can look at all the clicks that led to a purchase. And we can figure out, okay, if someone came and they were going to be a valid customer at some point, why didn't they convert right away? Why did they require additional paid clicks in order to move them along that path? And each paid click takes out a margin, which means that we can actually look at how much these clicks are worth. In one case, we were able to pull out about 32,000 assist clicks. We give them a 65-cent CPC, and that equals about $21,000 a month. And we said, well, what if you can't make this perfect? You can't get everyone to convert the first time, but what if you were able to at least remove a little bit from that purchase path? What about 30%? Well, that gives you about $75,000 every year that you can invest, at least in this case, that you could reinvest in marketing. And at the same time, you would also probably see greater success because you would see less abandonment, as people don't have to leave your site and come back. Likely when they're leaving your site, either doing research on another third-party site, possibly one of your competitors, let's get them on the site, let's get them to convert. And these are all just high-level opportunities we see from these tools. And we want to surface these, but what advertisers have figured out is that the more that they can find, because this is an auction, that anything that's adopted at a mass scale, it makes the market more efficient, but really the opportunity for growth comes from individual insights, where the companies that are able to go through this data, to mine this data, really are able to find competitive advantages for their business by allowing them to bid more effectively and more efficiently. They know where to find the customers that are going to spend more, or that are going to convert quicker, or that are going to lead to more new customers. Whatever their metrics are, whatever they're able to uncover, it gives them a strategy to bid that the rest of the auction may not be following. So that's really the value of digging through this data on your own, looking through your Google Analytics account and seeing what you can actually find. And what's nice about all these opportunities, everything that we talked about here, everything that we know about attribution, the nice thing is that out of all these opportunities, really you have everything that you need to take the first step today. And that's really what's at the core of our multi-channel funnels product. So with multi-channel funnels, you're actually able to get all of these insights and all of these data points specifically for your business. And not even just the ones that we cover. We actually identified, and we put up a handful here, where you can actually go through and see all of these individual reports, and more than we even talked about, all these opportunities. And that's what advertisers have really been asking us for, is not just help automating and building attribution models, but really giving them more insights and more data points by which they can pull. Now what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to begin a live demo portion for today's. Now before we start, please take a moment to turn off your pop-up blocker on your browser, as the demo will open a new browser window for you. If a new window does not open there will be a launch screen share link appearing in the slide window. So please hold down the control key on your keyboard and click the link, and that should bypass any pop-up blockers you have installed. So again, if you do have pop-up blockers or it doesn't appear, there will be a launch screen share link appearing. So just hold down the control key on your keyboard, click that link, and we should be able to bypass any pop-up blockers that come up. Give everyone a few minutes while I launch the account on my side as well. Okay, we should be sending from our side. I'll give a couple more seconds in case anyone's running into any technical difficulties. You can also submit something by Q&A if you're having any issues getting this particular report up. Where we're going to be starting today is just let's take a look at this broad account. So again, with these areas of opportunity, right now we're looking at the Google Store account. So the Google Store account is actually, we have an online store. It doesn't receive a lot of traffic, but it's enough for this example. Some of the sample sizes that we're looking at, only because there's not a strong advertising push for our online store, are going to be relatively small sample sizes. So nothing that I would make a decision on, at least within some of these channels and keywords, but it will be representative of some of the trends you can at least identify through your own accounts, where hopefully you have more volume to work with. So as we go through, we're actually starting. This is the standard reporting tab of Google Analytics, where most people will start when they go directly into their Analytics account. What you can actually do is if you go on the left-hand side under Conversions, you're going to see an area right here known as Multi-Channel Funnels. And where we're going to start the discussion today is really by clicking on this Overview tab, Multi-Channel Funnels, which starts us off at what I would consider to be a high-level executive summary of what's actually going to appear. Now, one thing that's important, in 2 webinars ago, we talked about setting up goals. We talked about setting up e-commerce. Even today, we talked about setting up micro-conversions, which are a type of goal. It's important when you're doing these analyses to realize that customers will have different types of behavior based on what the particular goal is. So, for instance, somebody signing up for an email is likely going to have less steps than somebody making a purchase. So before you go through any of these analysis, and I can't tell you how many times I've actually made this mistake on my own doing these analyses, is to make sure you click the conversion tab up on the top left and only select the particular goals or e-commerce transactions that you're interested in looking at. That way you're not looking at an entire pool of aggregate data, often with different conversion paths, different customers, and different intents. In this case, we're just going to uncheck all of the goals that are in this demo account, and we're only going to focus on those that are e-commerce transactions. You hit apply. It'll load for a moment, and then we know that we're only looking specifically within those people that actually made a purchase on the Google Store. Now, as we go through this, it's important to, this is easily one of the most powerful tools ever built within Google Analytics. It is free to everyone, and also data is backfilled all the way to January 2011. Now, data tends to be dynamic, so you may not want to go all the way back that far when you're doing analysis, but at least you have some data to already work from. It also depends on having conversions set up properly so that you have data and you know what the end of the path is. Other prerequisites, just to get them out of the way, these were all covered, but the four things you really need for multi-channel funnels is you do need to have a goal or e-commerce, as I said, actually set up. And if you load multi-channel funnels and you see a big block of text that says no goals or e-commerce are set up, that's likely going to be the issue. The second requirement, having auto-tagging or correct manual tagging enabled. So we actually have a custom URL builder for those people that prefer to use manual tagging. And what this is really for is that we tend to take all the volume and all the clicks that come into your website, and we use this auto-tagging to understand what type of links that they are. So if it's a paid advertising campaign, we depend on auto-tagging to be able to identify that. Manual tagging works just as well if set up properly, which is why we're going to provide you with the documentation to make sure that that in fact comes through. We also need to link this account to AdWords, which just makes sense because it provides the bridge between your keyword campaign and placement data. And we also, as I said, we also have webinars on these to go through the individual requirements if you want. Now, going through this first report, when we look through this, what we'll see here are really the individual channels that are coming through. So what we see in this Venn diagram, and this is what I like to call the C-level report, is where you can actually see the overlap of individual channels. And this helps you understand if you even have an attribution problem to begin with. So for instance, those companies where you may have a goal such as lead gen or something where people convert very quickly, you may not have overlapping circles, meaning it's usually 1.5 average clicks until a conversion. In this case, what we see here is we see organic search, and we see direct, and we see paid search. And every area there's an overlap are those that are actually conversions where they touched both channels, but using a last click model, only one of them would actually receive credit for the conversion. Now, if we look at the particular metrics, what we have here are roughly 592 conversions that were measured during this period, which means 592 individual channels would be given last click credit. And the 237 are assisted conversions. So what's an assisted conversion? An assisted conversion is any time a channel is involved but is not the last click. Now, it's important to note that this is not a measure of efficiency. So, for instance, if you had 10 email clicks and then someone went through, say, a paid search ad to convert, it would only be one assist for email. Equally, if there were 2 or 3 paid search clicks and then someone clicked on display before they were converting, that would only count as one assist for paid search. So just keep that in mind. It's not a measure of efficiency and really represents a lower bound for an attribution problem when you're investigating it. Now, when we're looking at these individual paths, when we're looking at what's actually happening, this is all based on a 30-day look-back window from the conversion. So if I were to make a purchase on the Google Store today, this particular tool would look back and give assist credit to any interactions that I had 30 days prior to that conversion. Now, this is important because if I took an action 31 days or 60 days ago, it would not be included in the purchase path. So just keep that in mind that it's only 30 days. It's also based on cookies. And what that effectively means is that if you're using a laptop here and then you go and you switch to a different computer or a tablet, it will start new conversion paths. It's just there's no easy way to measure across devices at this point, but it's just something to keep in mind that people can start different conversion paths as they move between different devices. The final thing to mention is that this data, as we go through, will not match up directly with AdWords. So if you look at the conversion data and you compare it to your AdWords data, you're going to see a discrepancy. It shouldn't be large, but we expect it to be there. And the reason really has to do with the timing. So within AdWords, AdWords will actually measure conversion from the day that the ad was clicked. So if I clicked on a paid search ad 5 days ago and then came back directly today to purchase, AdWords will assign a credit 5 days ago when that ad was clicked. Whereas when we look at this tool and we do this analysis, keep in mind that multi-channel funnels will actually assign credit on the day the conversion actually occurred. As we move through with this overview report, the next area of opportunity we go to is we go to the assisted conversions. So within assisted conversions, really what we're going to do is start actually getting into the data of this performance. Now what you'll see right here is a very large and daunting table, and we'll go through what some of these individual groupings mean and how they impact. So the first is by going through with the organic search. Organic search is anything that comes from a search engine that was tagged as really visited from unpaid search. So there's two tags we look at, source and medium. If medium equals organic, then it goes into search, and it also constitutes most of the major search engines. Direct is when someone comes to a website, but there wasn't any referral data. So if they typed your URL in directly or they came from a bookmark, that will go into the direct bucket. Paid search are any AdWords or other accounts that are tagged as being CPC or PPC. Referral buckets are visits from websites that are not social networks, and social networks are visits from websites that were tagged specifically as being a social network. So we have a list of about 400 of them: Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. They all come through, and they're automatically grouped within the social network set. It's important also to note that when things do come from social networks, we're not able to look at, for instance, someone making a wall posting on Facebook or tweeting about your brand. We only measure those clicks that come in directly from those social networks to your website. Now, there's some other groups that some of you may be seeing in your own account data that's worth mentioning. We do allow people to assign through, as we discussed, tagging emails. So some people will can actually set up a group to capture their email performance. Some of you may also see display, which would capture anything that, say, for instance, on the GDN that was a display ad. But it's important to note that we do make a distinction within these basic channel groupings, where we will put GDN non-text ads in display, and GDN text will actually go into other advertising. Because there's a discussion to say, well, is a text ad really, even though it's served on a display network, is a display? Does it have the same type of influence? Does it have the same type of behavior? And for those reasons, we actually put them into a separate group. And we're actually sending out a link as well where you can take a look at all the individual channel groupings and their definitions, so that after this you have an understanding as to, if you're setting up your tags, how you should be doing that to set them up effectively and correctly. Now, with any of these individual categories that you see here, you do have the option to click into any of them to get a little bit more data and a little bit more granularity. So for instance, if we were to click the referral group here, the report loads, you could then see all the individual sources, the individual websites that were then sending traffic directly through as part of the referral group. And if you want a quick tip, there's often been questions about how exactly you understand if all your pages are tagged. So I said there were 4 requirements. I didn't discuss one of them, which is you need to make sure all your pages are tagged. This is the easiest way to actually find out if it's there. So when you go through the referral grouping is looking at any website that sent traffic that was not a paid ad, was not an organic ad, or a known social network. If you go through this report, if you actually see yourdomainname.com appearing anywhere in this source list, it actually is highly indicative that there's a page somewhere on your website that's part of the conversion path that does not have Google Analytics tags set up on it properly. And because of that, when you look at multi-channel funnels, it says someone came from a page that was tagged, went to one that wasn't, and it creates a break in that visit and creates what we effectively call a self-referral. So if you see it there, it's just indicative of that. The 2 caveats. One is, because we can't identify exactly what page it is, if there's not a high volume that's coming in on these numbers when we look at assist and last, and we'll go through their meaning in a moment, it may not be worth the time tracking down. If it is a large percentage, you definitely want to try to take a look at your tags to understand where you're missing coverage. The other thing to note as you're going through these individual tags as well is that we're not going to be able to measure pages that are outside the conversion path. So if someone were to go to, say, an investor relations or a terms of service page that's outside of that flow, if it's not part of a conversion, it's not going to be recorded, and therefore you wouldn't see it. So this isn't a solution to find out all the pages on your website as to which ones are tagged, just those that are part of customers that are on their conversion paths. Easy enough? Let's go back one level up just so we can go to the channel groupings. Now, we really want to focus on 3 columns here. So last interaction conversions, which is in the middle, that's from a last click basis. How many conversions would be allocated to each individual channel? So in this case, organic search, 263 conversions would be attributed to organic search on a last click basis, 228 for direct, and so forth. In the assisted conversion column, the very first one, we look at how many conversions each channel was part of, but it was not the last click. So in the case of organic search was not the last click for 134 conversion paths, which meant that it happened somewhere before the last click and it was not given any credit for it. So if someone went from organic search to organic search and then converted, because organic search is the last click, it would not get any credit as an assist. It would simply be one for the last interaction conversion. Also, something to keep in mind is this metric all the way at the end, which is probably the most powerful that we have in multi-channel funnels, which is the assist to last interaction conversion ratio. Very long-winded, but what this is simply dividing the assist by the last click. So earlier in the presentation, we had that bar chart where we showed how various channels were assisting versus being last click, measuring really close to the conversion. That's exactly what this metric is for and how that information is arranged. If you click on the header of this particular column, you can actually sort these numbers. And you can see that those that have higher ratios relative to other channels are ones that are assisting, that are working further away from the last click. And therefore, when you look at their overall value, it's likely going to be missed. So likely you may see higher CPAs or just not capturing the full contribution of the channels that are actually driving more assists than last clicks. And that's the easiest way to look at this column. And what's nice is that when we look at these as well, remember this is always relative, right? So you're simply looking at how other channels compare to other channels in your marketing mix. There's not an absolute scale. Saying that a number is over 1 or below 1 is helpful to say whether it predominantly assists or converts, but really what you're focused on is how they're performing relative to others because it will influence your investments. So for instance, we can actually drill down a little bit further. If you use the primary dimension tab, click on Other, and then click on AdWords and go to AdWords keyword. We can view all the individual AdWords keywords and those that come in and assist more than they would actually be the last click. So in this case, on the top we have Google Store where there were 32 conversions that would be measured to that term, again using the last click, where it also assisted in 25 other conversions that would likely be entirely missed using a last click model. And of course, we don't have a lot of data here, but usually you're going to see, we've seen assist to last ratios as high as I think 16 or 17 to 1, or 17 assist keywords have been helping with, and only 1 that it would actually receive credit for because of the last click. And this is where that information can be surfaced quickly and easily so that you can understand how keywords, campaigns, and if we click back down, you can actually see the entire list. You can take a look at different match types, different placements, different targeting types, even destination URLs, as to see how those are impacting where you're reaching people within the marketing funnel. The higher the ratio, the further away it is from a conversion, and the higher the likelihood that it will actually lose a contribution by using a last click. Now, another quick opportunity, now that we're over in this tab, is if you click on traffic sources, you're going to see a lot of these same characteristics, but you'll notice they don't have AdWords in front of them. So when you click on the traffic sources tab, in this case we're going to go to keywords, you can actually look at all of the keywords that are driving traffic into the site, even if they're not covered on paid advertising. So what advertisers have been doing is actually taking this list, exporting it out, and then actually comparing it against their current paid search coverage to make sure that all the terms that are actually along the conversion path, all those terms, even if they're assisting, at least have keyword coverage. That way they're making sure that they're investing across the entire length of the funnel. So it's really easy to look at. It's really powerful. And we recommend just going through this and really identifying those that are assisting more than the last click to understand where there's opportunity. Now returning back to the basic channel grouping, another tab area that I want to just draw your attention to here is this first interaction analysis. So right here now we're looking at all assists, which means it took place anywhere beyond the last click. What if we want to look at those channels that are specifically reaching people as the very first click? Well, that's exactly what the first interaction analysis is for. So what you can do is you can go into this report, and now you'll see that last click stays the same, but we replace first click, and now assists now become first click. So you can see for 291 conversions, organic search was the very first interaction that people had on their way to a conversion. And just to note with overlap, if there was only a one-click path, it would only go to the last interaction conversion. So if someone just clicked on organic search, it wouldn't count as one first and one last. It would simply just go to the last bucket. But here, for those customers that have the longer paths, you know the path that they actually went through and the first step that they took to actually reach into your website, so reaching out to new visitors. Now, if we wanted to go a step further, say you were really interested in reaching those people that have never been to your website before. So you want first clicks, but you really want to say, what are the first clicks for people that have never heard of my brand, never seen my site? We actually have a few tabs for you there. So if you use the secondary dimension tab on the left, right, a lot of these look familiar from the other, but you'll see how this comes in, and you click on visitors, you can actually select new visitor. And when you select new visitors, it will present a yes/no column in the middle, where it will give you a choice to say, okay, were these actually new visitors to your site? So as we discussed before, multi-channel funnels looks back 30 days and captures all that behavior. But we actually have a GA cookie that lasts for a lot longer, a period of years, where we can measure whether someone's an absolute new visitor when they make that first visit. So they've never been to your website before, at least according to their cookie. And it'll show, in this case, for organic search, there were 243 people that came through that eventually purchased, and they were new visitors that were never at the Google store before. Now we also have the no, which makes it a little bit confusing because now you have additional columns. And I'll show you a quick way to remove that, is that we click on Advanced, Dimensions, New Visitor, and Exactly Matching Yes. Now what you have here is you know how many new visitors that eventually purchased were driven by each individual channel. As I said before, you can also drill this down so you can see what particular keywords, what campaigns were also contributing to the most new visitors. And then right away you have an understanding as to how they're actually performing. And what's nice with these secondary dimensions as well is that you can also break them down by geo. If you're interested, you can break them down by mobile device, by language. You can also look at those customers that bounced. And I encourage you to go through these individual segments to take a look at how performance is differing and where you're reaching new customers, where your business is growing from. But also remember that with a lot of these, that it's not strictly a measure of volume. So with some of us, you may say, okay, organic search was 243, or you may see keywords that have a lot of new volume. And the inclination may be, okay, well, these are the keywords that are really driving the most traffic. What you really want to take a look at is what percentage of clicks were actually new ones. So if you export these reports out, compare them to the total amount of clicks that you see within AdWords. And that way you'll be able to see, out of the 1,000 or so clicks that you received, how many were actually new visitors. And what you can then use that for is to figure out what's the probability out of 100 clicks that you're going to reach new visitors. And those with the highest probabilities are the ones that you want to invest in if you really want to attract those new people to your website. Some advertisers even go a step further where they say it's great that these channels have the highest likelihood of reaching new customers. But what I'm curious to know, either with first click analysis or with these assist clicks, is I want to see which ones are actually driving on a cost basis. So some of them are actually divided by the cost that they're spending. So a cost per new visitor or a cost per assist. And that's the powerful insights that you can just do by meshing this data directly with your clicks and your cost from within AdWords. Now, there's a few more reports that we need to go through, even though we could easily spend a couple hours just going through this one. The next report is really the top conversion paths. And for all practical purposes, this might as well be all conversion paths with how much data it shows. But a few things to note about this report. What this report will do, and I call it a high-level, another C-level report, is it will show you how people are moving through individual paths, individual clicks. So when we talk about assist really not being a measure of efficiency, this is where you can start to pull out the individual clicks and the total that occur. So in this case, you can see how many times people are going through organic search or paid search. And there's a few ways you can use this report. The first is that you can use it just to understand how people are moving through different paths. So for instance, if you were to click on the secondary dimension tab, AdWords, and then AdWords keyword path, what it would do side by side, it would join the individual keywords that people are going through. So in the case of row number 8, how people are moving from paid search, they're looking for Google Store, and then moving to direct. And as you have more robust marketing paths, you're actually going to be able to see how people go through, and they go through display to search, the multiple search terms, and you can understand how they're actually moving and refining their terms. The other thing you can use, and a lot of people are interested in this because they want the raw data. I think it was last week on Tuesday we actually released the API for multi-channel funnels. So you can actually go directly into multi-channel funnels and pull out all of this raw data so that you can run your own analyses on this. And where some companies do it is they tend to look at trends as to how people starting on display move through, what keywords and what clusters they go through. So they really just want this raw data. They really want to work with it on their own, and this is a report that's going to get you all the inputs. And of course, as with any other report, you're not limited just to this level. You can look at individual keywords, campaigns, and get as granular as you really want. The final two reports that are worth mentioning are both the time lag and path length reports. Now, these are very similar in design and function, with one key difference. The time lag report is going to look at the total time that it takes someone to actually convert, to move through the path. So time lag 0 are people that purchased on the same day as their first interaction. The path length report looks at how many individual clicks they had to go to, how many times they had to come back to your website before they actually made a purchase. Now, from a high level, what a lot of people will look at is use this as a gauge to say, how long do people take to convert? And if I'm running an experiment, how long do I need to wait? And some of them even use this as a measure of efficiency so that they can say, well, if most people are taking 3 interactions to convert, let's see if we improve our website, if we can drive that down. Because less interactions likely means less paid advertising costs, which means you can invest that money elsewhere and you're more efficient. But there's also a few other ways you can use this information. So for instance, from the path length report, what you can do is if you click export on the top and TSV for Excel, since that will work best for this demo, you can actually export this data directly out and take a look at how your average order value changes as people move through. Now, in the interest of time, what I actually did was I actually ran through this to pull these reports out, and these are the reports from Google, where we have the total amount of conversions and the conversion value. This is a direct export that you get. Simply, if you go through and divide these two numbers, what you end up with is the average order value for people that converted on that first interaction. And if you were to just drag that formula out, you can actually see how they changed. And again, apologies for the low volume, but I think the point's clear here. What you can actually see is you can split customers and understand, okay, so the people that take 3 interactions to convert, that's actually not a bad thing because they're spending significantly more than people that convert on the first visit. Now, when you think about this from a targeting perspective, going back to this idea of remarketing, so we recently launched a product called GA Remarketing, which allows you to use characteristics within Google Analytics to reach people and to target directly to them. And if you saw someone that was already at your website 2 times, and you think there's a high likelihood they're going to convert on the third, they may be worth targeting because they spend significantly more than other populations. And when as you go through there, if they didn't spend more, if you saw the same number all across, that's when you may want to focus on efficiency and really trying to drive everyone on the first or second conversion because there's no incrementality if they go additional clicks. But really, here's a quick opportunity to say, well, how do people actually spend as they spend more time with our website? Equally, if you go back to Google Analytics, what we also have the power to do is not just look at how one customer segment, everyone converts. We can actually use these customer segments on the top to actually split these groups further. So in this case, what if we wanted to look at the first interaction, the first click on the path being paid advertising, the first interaction being direct, and the first interaction being organic search? How do those differ? So if we were to apply those segments, this is really amazing. You get these individual reports where you can actually see how everybody converts, and you see how they convert at different times and they spend different amounts. And it's interesting because now you get a sense to say, okay, depending on how they first come into our website, they actually perform differently. But in the same way, you can export this report out. And to save a little time, I cleaned it up on our side. I actually exported this data out and I just split it into groups and did the same average order value calculations that we had in the previous example. And what you can see here is you can see how, based on where people come from, what their first interaction is, how that changes our average order value. So before we were looking and saying that people that went through and had 3 interactions with our site, they spent $400 and they were really valuable. But now if you split those out just a little bit further and you look at those people that went through 3 times but came and started their path with direct, they actually spent $770 on every purchase. That means, again, if you were to target people, if you can target people that have been to your site twice, that have started on direct, those are going to be the people that are worth a lot of money. And you can also play this out in a very broad context just to look at differences. So we know people that start conversion paths on display or on direct, which is with this line here, they spend on average $326. People that start on organic search, they spend less, $154. And unfortunately, in the case of the Google store, people that are searching on paid advertising are starting at $76. So it makes you think. It makes you think, well, how valuable are these customers? Who should I be targeting and retargeting to? And also when you go through and you think about your experience, your landing page, I'm curious to know how many people on this call are actually giving everybody the same landing page experience, even knowing that now that they may actually spend more when they do convert. Some customers are more valuable, and you can understand those trends just by looking specifically at what those conversion paths are. And that's what we have the power of actually doing now through these individual reports. If we go back to Google Analytics, you'll also be able to build out what we call these customized conversion segments in an infinite number of ways. So if you go through conversion segments, the ones we were looking at were first interaction, paid advertising, and direct and organic search. You can actually create new custom segments where you can say, what if any interaction, maybe a first interaction, included a particular keyword or included a particular campaign or was a new visitor. And you can see how long those customers take to develop, how long they take to convert, and how to get the best performance out of them. These are all tools that are directly available in multi-channel funnels and ready for you right now. Now, there's a lot of reports and a lot of insights. Many of these findings are published on the Google Analytics website. We'll continue to roll out, as you said, there's more reports and more ideas. Briefly in the closing minutes, before we get to some Q&A, I just wanted to talk briefly about just some of the other opportunities and things that we're looking at as we go towards the future. Hopefully slides have appeared back on your website. If not, they should in just a moment. All right, so the future, what are we working on? What do we really see areas of opportunity? So as I told you when we started that, a lot of advertisers are really just looking for any data points they get so they can understand more about their customers. Some things that you may find and that we're looking at. First is we're looking further from each conversion. So there have been some questions. The look back window is 30 days. What happens with longer purchases? Well, micro conversions are your first step so that you can see interactions that are happening along that path. But we're also looking, and we have heard the feedback, and we are looking for ways to expand that. Nothing to announce today, but stay tuned. We're also looking at opportunities to improve measurement across devices. So we are limited to individual devices because of cookies. We're going to see if we can improve that or at least get some insight as to how things are moving between cross-device and between mobile. Also, greater integration between insights and bidding. So right now, when we talk about some of these reports, and I mentioned you have to go into AdWords to actually pull your cost information or your individual clicks, we're working on building those measurement systems closer to a bidding system so you can actually understand and get those metrics in the same place. And the final one together is also joining together multiple conversions. So when you're looking through all these micro conversions, instead of looking at them all into one path and saying this is a path somebody follows to sign up to email, we'd like to see where we get to a point where you can actually group together people that sign up for email and the interactions that they get before they actually make a purchase and then they make a purchase again. These are all areas that we're looking at. This is what forms the customer journey. This is what forms the subject area of attribution here at Google. Now, it is ambitious. There are a lot of things that we're still working on. It's going to be an exciting year, but hopefully we've given you some great opportunities to get started. Now, it's not complete answers. These opportunities will differ for every advertiser, but generally to surmise our perspective on it, and this actually comes from our philosophy, is that we do set goals that we know we can't reach just yet, because we know by stretching to reach them, we're going to get a lot further than expected. And we thank you for joining us on this journey. We thank you for using our products and spending your time with us today. Now we'd like to do some Q&A to see if there's some specific questions that we can help you with.
Okay, thanks, Neil. That was a great presentation. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with us. Just a reminder before you go, if you can please click on that survey link. First question that we'd like to look at is, it came in actually from a couple of different people. What do you do when you don't have a conversion dollar amount in assisted conversions, for example, if you're not an e-commerce company?
So the way that I would answer that, if you don't have a dollar amount associated in assisted conversion, is to at least set one up within your goals. So if you're asking people for a lead, it's worthwhile to quantify how much that lead is actually worth for your business. If not, if you take that out, you just won't have the dollar value in assisted conversions, which means that all interactions are the same, and most of the analyses should hold. I would avoid using the middle columns. You're going to see zeros in the assisted conversion value and the last interaction conversion value, and that's fine. But I would really focus on how you assign a dollar value to those individual goals.
Okay. Next question that came in was, what would be a good ratio for assist to last clicks?
Good ratio, a magic number. We haven't seen any because it actually differs across the vertical and across the company. So, for instance, those companies that are simply looking for a lead gen or asking people to sign up, there's not going to be there's going to be maybe 2-3 interactions, and they're going to have very low assist to last ratios. For those companies that have more complex, higher order value amounts, they're going to see longer paths, which means that they're going to have higher assist to last ratios. What I'd instead focus on is how those ratios differ within against other channels. So why would one be higher versus lower? And also, as you continue to invest and optimize, I would look at how those ratios change. So, for instance, if you see display has a very low ratio and looks like it's converting very well, and you start to invest more and more in display and ramp up, does that ratio go up? Are you reaching people that are at a different part of the funnel? How did that work with scaling? Equally, if you were to build a campaign, then you say, okay, this campaign is going to reach people this is going to be awareness. We're going to focus on brand. And you would expect it to have a very high ratio. Well, does it? Also with mobile campaigns, because some people may go from mobile to convert on a desktop, you may see very high assist to last ratios. So I would look at how those ratios actually compare relative to other channels and relative to the expectations and intent of the advertising programs over trying to actually understand an absolute metric or what should be a positive benchmark that you should aim for.
So you talked about the length of time that we have. What do you recommend for lead generation sites where the user takes longer than 30 days to convert?
For sites where it takes longer than 30 days, I offer a few things. First of all, we are aware of this particular problem, and it's something I know that our product and engineering teams are actively looking at. So I would stay tuned to see if we can integrate something stronger into the product. The other two things that I would mention is we know the longer you go out from that 30-day period, the more we see increased cookie deletion rates, and where you see larger influence from other activities we can't measure, some of those being social network activities on that site as well as offline interactions. Because of that, usually going out past 30 days becomes problematic with more noise in the data. I would actually suggest looking if there's more individual micro-conversions that you can use to bridge the gap. So, for instance, somebody that's looking at, let's just say, using automotive as an example, someone that's buying a car. I think one of our research reports put it that they start the consideration process 6 to 8 months out, which is definitely beyond the 30 days that we can capture. But for those, I would advise you look at things like, okay, what are the paths until people go through and they actually look up information or print a brochure about a particular car? And then what interactions happen where we drive people to the middle of the funnel where perhaps they're looking to actually customize a vehicle? And then setting up a third conversion to say, okay, these are people that are looking for the dealer locator. And that way you can just measure individual sections of the funnel within that 30-day window and just focus on those that are really saying, okay, this is where people are in individual stages of the funnel, and then hopefully we'll have some help on our side to give you some guidance as to how to join those together. But that would be my best approach instead of just really trying to get a lot further out than that 30 days.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. One that just came in is, how can I make sure that I did everything that I can to set up my analytics to see what we just saw? Is there some kind of a checklist?
We probably can publish a checklist, but I'll give you the basic high-level ideas now that you just want to go through, because if you have bad data coming in, then it's going to impact your results, and we don't want that. The first thing is obviously having Google Analytics, the latest tracking code enabled on your website, and the Google Analytics Help Center, when setting up your account, will have that. It shouldn't be an issue for anybody that's created an account within the past couple of years or has updated their code. You just want to make sure that you are using the latest code and that's in the right place on your website. And that's the basics for just getting Google Analytics in place. Once you get into multi-channel funnels, if you don't have goals or e-commerce, you probably weren't able to get into reports, and that issue is fairly obvious. If you are and you're in assisted conversions, if you don't have your accounts linked or you don't have tagging set up correctly, likely you're going to see one of those basic channel groupings being disproportionately out based on your investment. So, for instance, if you were to go into paid search and you're spending several thousand a month on paid search and you see 0 assists or you see 5 or 6 assists, chances are that there is something broken in the tagging or that you don't have your accounts linked. So when you look for numbers that are disproportionately high. The last thing that I would do is I would go into that referrals group. So from the assisted conversion report, click on the referrals channel grouping, and it will show you a list, again, of all those domains that are bringing traffic directly into your website. If you see your domain in there, then you are likely missing some pages and page coverage, which means you're not capturing the entire conversion funnel. And worse is those people that are coming to those untagged pages, you're likely losing out on the clicks that they had before them. So someone going from a paid ad to an untagged landing page. Check those out, make sure those numbers aren't completely crazy, and that should be good. And to that advice, I think we can publish a checklist online that just goes through and gives you a little bit more clarity and gives you a structure as to how you make sure that your implementation is in good shape.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much, Neil, for that. Thanks again to everyone for joining. Just a final reminder to please fill out that survey before you leave. We'll be sending an email sometime in the next few days with a link to the recording. And in that email, we'll also include links so that you can register for future webinars. We have a couple of related webinars coming up. The final webinar in this series will be on attribution modeling, and that's scheduled for sometime in early October. We don't have the exact date yet, but you will be able to pre-register. And we also have an online-to-store conversion tracking webinar coming up, I believe, on September 20th. So look out for that email in a few days. I think we also may try to follow up with a blog post which will include responses to some of the questions that we talked about today. So look for that on the Google Analytics blog also sometime in the next week or so. Thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.